Saturday morning, August 27, 2025. The bells of Annunciation Catholic Church in Minneapolis echoed through quiet streets. Families walked up the steps together, children tugging at their parents' hands, the smell of polished wood and incense clinging to the air. It felt like every other Sunday. Safe. Ordinary. A place where people believed nothing bad could ever happen. But safety is an illusion. And that illusion was about to be ripped apart. At exactly 10:14 a.m., as the congregation stood for prayer, the heavy wooden doors burst open. A man stepped inside. His footsteps echoed, his hands gripping a weapon etched with words investigators would later call chilling, names of other killers, other massacres. In seconds, the sound of hymns was replaced by something no one in that church will ever forget: the crack of gunfire. Imagine sitting there, your child beside you. 1 second you're whispering prayers, the next you're on the floor, covering your ears, wondering if this is the last moment of your life. 17 people would be injured. 2 children would never leave that church alive. And the shooter? He didn't come for money. He didn't come for revenge against one person. He came for something darker. Something he had been planning for years. This wasn't chaos without reason. It was a message. A carefully crafted act of hate and destruction, written long before the first shot was fired. His name was Robin Westman. If you passed him on the street, you wouldn't notice him. Thin. Pale. Eyes that didn't quite meet yours. He was the kind of man who drifted through life unnoticed, blending into the background. But behind that quiet shell, something sinister had been growing. He had once been a boy who walked through those same church doors, sitting in the very pews he would one day drench in blood. Teachers remembered him as quiet, even strange. A loner. The kind of kid who never smiled in class photos, who never raised his hand. His classmates said he was easy to ignore. But years before the shooting, Westman had started to change. He isolated himself, withdrawing from family and friends. Nights stretched into mornings as he sat in front of a glowing computer screen, scrolling through online forums that fed his darkest impulses. Communities where killers were praised, where names like Columbine and Sandy Hook weren't treated as tragedies, but as legends. In those corners of the internet, he found purpose. He found validation for the anger he couldn't explain. His journals, discovered later by police, told the story of a man obsessed with violence. Page after page, he listed names, dates, and methods of past mass shooters, almost as though he was studying them, almost as though he was preparing. On the margins of one page, investigators found 4 words scrawled in jagged handwriting: "I will be remembered." But remembered for what? Not for building something. Not for love. Not for a family. For destruction. In July, just weeks before the shooting, Westman purchased a firearm legally. To anyone else, it was just paperwork. But when investigators recovered it after the attack, they were horrified. On the barrel, scratched in uneven letters, were the names of past shooters. Carved tributes to killers he idolized. He wasn't just carrying a weapon. He was carrying a manifesto, written in steel. And he had chosen his stage. Annunciation Catholic Church wasn't random. It was personal. It was the church where he had once been a boy in Sunday school, where he had once sung hymns with his parents. It was the place that had seen him grow, and in his mind, the place that had rejected him. His journals hinted at grudges, at feeling abandoned by faith, by community, by God himself. And so, he would return. Not as a worshiper, but as a destroyer. On that August morning, he dressed in plain clothes, nothing tactical, nothing that would draw attention. He carried 2 weapons, both loaded, both waiting. And when he pushed open those wooden doors at 10:14 a.m., it wasn't improvisation. It was a performance. A performance he had been rehearsing in his mind for years. The first shot rang out like thunder. Then another. Then another. A father tried to shield his son, pushing him under the pew as bullets ripped through the sanctuary. A choir singer screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos before she dove behind the altar. People dropped to the ground, hands over their heads, praying, not for salvation, but for survival. One survivor later told reporters, "It didn't feel real. It felt like I was outside my body, like I was watching a nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was happening." And through it all, Westman's expression never changed. Witnesses said his face was blank, his eyes hollow. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He just fired calmly, methodically, as though he had all the time in the world. Minutes felt like hours. Outside, neighbors heard the echoes. Some thought it was construction. Some thought it was fireworks. But when the screams pierced the morning air, when people began running from the church doors covered in blood, reality hit. Calls flooded 911. "There's a shooter in the church. Please send help. There are children inside. Oh my God, there are people down everywhere." Police units were dispatched immediately. But for those still trapped inside, every second was a coin flip between life and death. Officers breached the church, weapons raised. They didn't know how many shooters there were. They didn't know how many were alive inside. What they did know was that time was bleeding away. Every shot inside meant another life slipping closer to death. Westman opened fire on them too. An officer was struck in the leg, dragged out by his partner as glass and wood splintered around them. But in the chaos, heroes emerged. Survivors pulled children through side exits. Strangers pressed their hands against wounds, whispering comfort to the injured. A teenager named Marcus Davis saved a boy no older than 7 by dragging him towards safety. Marcus was shot before he made it outside. That child lived because of him. By 10:22 a.m., only 8 minutes after the attack began, 17 people were down. 2 children were gone. And still, Westman fired. At 10:28 a.m., he paused near the altar. Survivors said he seemed almost calm, almost satisfied, as though he had achieved what he came for. And then, in one final act, he turned the weapon on himself. The gunshot silenced the church. When police reached him, he was lying beneath the altar, his weapon still in hand, the jagged names carved into the steel glinting in fractured sunlight. The massacre was over. But the aftermath was only beginning. Investigators uncovered his journals, his research, his obsession with previous shooters. His goal was never to escape. His goal was to be remembered, to carve his name into the same dark history he worshipped. For the families, there would never be enough answers. Birthdays missed. Empty chairs at dinner tables. Children who would never grow up. For survivors, every creak of a pew, every toll of a church bell, became a haunting reminder of the morning when peace was stolen. The sanctuary of Annunciation Catholic Church became a crime scene. Blood stained the marble floors. Shards of stained glass littered the pews. Incense still hung in the air, mixed with the metallic tang of gunpowder. But outside, something remarkable happened. Candles were lit. Families gathered. They prayed again, not in silence, not in fear, but in defiance. The bells rang once more, not for celebration, but for resilience. And yet, the question remains. How many more times must we watch sanctuaries turn into slaughterhouses? How many more children must be buried before the warning signs are taken seriously? How many more names must be etched into steel before we admit the truth? This was the story of Annunciation Catholic Church, of the day when prayers were silenced by gunfire. But it is also a story about the world we live in, a world where monsters hide in plain sight, where obsession festers in shadows, and where tragedy waits patiently until the moment it steps into the light. And for Minneapolis, for the families, for the survivors, August 27, 2025 will never be just a date on a calendar. It will forever be the day when innocence was lost, when peace was shattered, and when a community learned that even in a house of God, the illusion of safety can vanish in the sound of a single gunshot.